So a look ahead at players who have only 1 to 2 years left on their contracts shows the Chiefs have some big decisions to make. Decisions that, if made correctly, could further set up the dynasty for continued success, or if made wrong, could put a strain on it all. And I will look at all this in today's video after I talk about Richie James giving reasons for his down year in KC, a potential JuJu Smith-Schuster return, and more. But first, how about those? First up, former Chiefs receiver and current free agent Richie James has been on Twitter recently sharing some frustrations and even explanations for his lower production levels with the Chiefs last year. If you look at his career stats, he did post a career low in both yards and touchdowns, a disappointing 2023 if you were to compare that to his 2022 numbers with the New York Giants. I was definitely of the opinion he would be more involved than he was with the Chiefs offense, but he was placed on IR early on in the season, like September 20-something, due to an MCL injury and only played in 9 games total. This definitely affected his output and ability to gel and build rapport with Mahomes in an already overcrowded receiver room, which I believe hurt his value and plays a role as to why he's still currently a free agent. He's posted a few tweets in the last few weeks, though, saying he's ready, still quarterback friendly, and has always made the most of his chances, even with those opportunities being limited. Then most recently, somebody tried to say that Daniel Jones is a solid quarterback, and that's why Richie James had a career year with him, while his year with KC was pretty underwhelming. Well, Richie found that tweet and said Daniel Jones didn't make him, though he basically wishes him well, then said loved playing with Pat, but when you have Travis Kelce, paid wide receivers, so I guess MVS and Justin Watson, and second rounders, i.e. Rice and Sky Moore, Richie believes you have to get them the ball more, even if he is open, ending it all by saying, quote, "It is a business." So he kind of said, hey, I was getting open, but wasn't the first or second, maybe even third option in the read progression, so my opportunities were limited. The only way to really verify that is to go through the film and watch play-by-play. I don't got time to do all that, but I do hope Super Bowl champion Richie James gets another shot elsewhere, even if it isn't with KC. Now, there's another receiver that could potentially hypothetically find their way returning to the Chiefs, and that is JuJu Smith-Schuster. In an article from Bleacher Report, Alex Ballantyne said, it was around June 30th, that 5 teams could be aggressive sellers before the trade deadline, with one of those being the Patriots. Then, of course, one of those players listed is JuJu Smith-Schuster, who obviously had a pretty trash year last season due to knee issues, but had nearly 1,000 yards with KC the year prior. So he could be a guy that's added later on if others on the roster, i.e. Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, struggle, especially if they are able to rework JuJu's contract to yet another 1-year prove-it deal. Joshua Briscoe of Sports Illustrated says if that's the case, quote, a reunion could be extremely logical for both parties. Of course, this is all hypothetical, and I would think that the Patriots keep JuJu around as a target for their newly drafted quarterback, but shoot, for a late-round pick and a reworked 1-year deal, sign me up for the JuJu Smith-Schuster return, especially if the Chiefs training staff think his knee issues that he suffered through last year are no longer a concern. This would definitely raise the floor of the wide receiver room even more. I like the Mecole Hardman signing, but would love a JuJu Smith-Schuster return even more, and this gives Mahomes another solid QB-friendly receiver in the middle of the field. But again, the odds of this happening seem pretty low at this point in time, and we will need to look at the current room as this is most likely who the Chiefs are going to roll with this season. I brought up the JuJu Smith-Schuster scenario because it is one of the more likely ones that we're going to see considering his recent history with the team. I think it's more likely than this idea from Anthony Palacios of Last Word on Sports that Tyler Lockett could find himself traded to the Chiefs to go and chase a Super Bowl ring. I mean, dude, anybody could go and end up on the Chiefs and chase a Super Bowl ring. I mean, sure, let's talk about Lockett for a second. He has had 4 1,000-yard seasons in the last 5 years, with his 2023 season being nearly 900 yards. But Lockett is going to be 32 years old come September, and he would definitely demand more trade capital than JuJu Smith-Schuster. This is why most of these reports I don't even bother with, because the Chiefs need to continue saving their draft capital with so many decisions to make in the future, unless it's something that's too good to be true or they can't pass up on it. I don't know why they would go and get Lockett before the trade deadline, but hey, I would not turn it down. These decisions that the Chiefs have to make in the future regarding contracts, they were talked about in detail on a recent hour-long podcast between Nick Jacobs and Matt Derrick, two Chiefs beat reporters, and they went in depth about future contract decisions Veach and company will need to make in the next few off seasons. And man, there is a lot to consider and think about. The link to their full podcast is in the description down below if you want the nitty-gritty full details. But an overview of some of the biggest players to consider looks something like this. The big three this season or this offseason that a lot of people talk about that could potentially get extended any day now are linebacker Nick Bolton, right guard Trey Smith, and center Creed Humphrey. They are all on a contract year, and I personally would think they view the importance of these three players in reverse order. You got Creed Humphrey first and foremost, then Trey Smith, and finally Nick Bolton. I'll get to why here in a second. Creed Humphrey is in line for a top-of-the-market deal, especially considering the fact that Jason Kelce is now retired, and many around the league now would have Creed as the best center in football, if not at least in the top three, and there's really no debate. Right now, Frank Ragnow, Ryan Kelly, and Lloyd Cushenberry are at the top of the center market as far as average salary goes, and I think it's reasonable to have Creed atop all of these guys, $14 million a year or maybe even more. So that would be no-brainer. Get that one done. For Trey Smith, things are a bit more complex because the right guard market, or just the guard market in general rather, went bananas this past free agency period, and you now have 6 guards getting $18 million or more per year. Right now, Joe Thuney, left guard, Joe Thuney is averaging $16 million a year. So a thought could be this. The Chiefs end up extending Trey Smith with the mindset that they move on from Joe Thuney after this year. Sure, Thuney is one of the best guards in the entire league, but next year he's going to be 33 years old with a cap hit of nearly $27 million. However, he carries just $10.9 million in dead money in 2025, so you could part ways and save roughly $16 million to lessen the blow. Part of this depends on Joe Thuney's level of play this season after sustaining that torn pec in the playoffs, but it will also depend on Trey Smith and his agent's desires. If they want as close as they possibly can to getting top of the market money, they'll probably need to hit free agency in order for that to happen from another team. But if Trey wants to stay in KC and continue stacking up those rings, maybe 3 in a row by that point, maybe he settles for closer to a top 5, top 10 amount of money with his next deal. And I am keeping the contract talk here very simple, just mainly talking about APY, average per year. There's also guaranteed money and a bunch of other stuff that could be factored into these contracts. But to keep it very simple, you mainly look at, or at least I am mainly looking at, APY, average per year. The third person on this list is going to be Nick the Hit Stick Bolton, a guy that is definitely an important piece of the Chiefs defense, but maybe not as important as some would make it seem, according to Seth Keysor of Chief in the North. I did an interview with him recently. If you want to check out the full interview, he breaks it down in much more detail here. But the Nick Bolton situation is basically this. He took a look at the Chiefs' defense's EPA per play and noted that it did not suffer a drop-off with Bolton absent due to injury while Drue Tranquill was on the field. That's why the signing of Drue Tranquill this past offseason was so crucially important. Not only do you get a guy who can step in for Nick Bolton if injuries were to occur, which is exactly what happened last year, but you also now have a guy who can play the Mike linebacker position if Nick Bolton were to move on in free agency this next offseason, i.e., Drue Tranquill is a bit of an insurance policy. This puts the Chiefs in a much less dire situation on the Nick Bolton front. If they can get a long-term deal done with Nick, great. But if they can't, they have Drue Tranquill, who has proven he can play the role just as effectively. Now, to be clear, I think the Chiefs would love for Bolton to return and will probably try to do maybe not all they can, but they'll probably try to offer him a pretty decent deal. I'm just not sure at this point in time if they will be willing to pay top of the market money for him. I would be pretty surprised if Bolton was paid more than the top 3 inside linebackers you see listed here. The main question is, would Nick Bolton command Patrick Queen money on the open market? Well, Jordan Dejani of CBS Sports recently ranked Bolton as the number 7 linebacker in the entire NFL, one spot above Patrick Queen and just behind CJ Mosley of the Jets. So some will definitely think he deserves more money than Queen. According to A to Z Sports, they appear to agree as well, listing his contract projection as 4 years, $71.9 million with $32 million guaranteed, and that averages out to $17.975 million per year. Meanwhile, Jordan Foote of Sports Illustrated gave him an estimated range of anywhere between $11.3 million per year all the way to $18 million per year. So Bolton could very well fall within that top of the line, maybe not all the way at the peak of the summit linebacker market, but right near in the top 5 range. You guys got to let me know in the comments down below where you think Nick Bolton could find himself pay-wise, average per year. But either way, Nick Bolton said he doesn't even want to talk extension with the team before training camp. Quote, "I just want to focus on getting through this season. We have one goal in mind right now, and that's being the first team to ever win 3 Super Bowls in a row. That's our mindset. I'll let my contract handle itself after our season. I just want to go out there and play the best football I can play. I'm hoping at the end of the year we can say we're the first team to ever win 3 in a row." So, at least as of right now, Bolton seems content to simply play out the last year of his deal and walk into the waters of free agency, a 3 in a row Super Bowl champ, and see what offers may come, unless he decides to get a deal done with the Chiefs early on in free agency. Outside of those big 3, Nick Bolton, Trey Smith, and Creed Humphrey, you have a few key players on the last year of their deals, with one only signing a 1-year deal to begin with, and those 4 players are kicker Harrison Butker, safety Justin Reed, defensive end Charles Omenihu, and wide receiver Hollywood Brown. Obviously, there are others, but these are probably 4 of the biggest ones that are on the last year of their deal outside of the big main 3. And I'm currently in the camp of pay Butker whatever the heck he wants because he's that good at his job and the Chiefs don't win back-to-back Super Bowls without him. I would also make the argument that Harrison Butker was the team's MVP last season. So pay the guy like it. I mean, obviously within the kicker range of pay him whatever he wants, but still, he's going to be worth it and more. For Justin Reed, if you can bring him back on a team-friendly deal that's still fair to him, I am definitely down, but the safety room is an intriguing one. You've got Brian Cook, Chamari Connor, and the newly drafted Jaden Hicks all in that room on rookie deals, so we shall see what happens there. Then Omenihu and Hollywood are question marks currently as far as what to do with them in the future. A lot depends on Omenihu's performance upon his return from ACL recovery. And then for Hollywood Brown, if he balls out going for over 1,000 yards, he might price himself out of KC just like JuJu Smith-Schuster did when signing with the Patriots after helping the team win Super Bowl 57. That's probably a conversation for a whole nother day, looking at the future of the wide receiver room with Travis Kelce only having a couple years left on his deal. So we're just going to leave that one as it is, pretty simple. Then, if you want to make things even more complex, Brett Veach and company also have to take into consideration that in January of 2025, so in roughly 5 months, they can start having contract extension talks with their 2022 draft class. That includes players like Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, Leo Chanel, Josh Williams, Jalen Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco. I would say with Snead gone, McDuffie is a must-keep. He's that good, one of the best cornerbacks in the entire NFL. Karlaftis would also be another must-keep for me alongside Chris Jones at the right price point. I would even love for Pacheco to stay around as well, but we know what the running back market looks like right now. It's very weird. Then you have tough decisions with Brian Cook and Leo Chanel. A lot is going to depend on their performance this year, but there is certainly a lot to consider when looking at who they want to keep around and can afford to pay. You aren't just balancing the salary cap for next year, but for several seasons after that. That's not even getting into the cap hits of Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes, and more. But I'll be intrigued to see how all this plays out in the coming months via maybe a Creed, Humphrey, and Trey Smith extension, and then extensions for others after this season. Who would you like to see stay? Who are your must-keep guys at all costs? Out of everyone I talked about today, I'd say Creed, McDuffie, and Karlaftis are must-keeps if at all possible, with Nick Bolton being pretty high up there on the list, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Anyway, that's all for today, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?